Carroll O'Connor was not the type to hold grudges casually. He believed in discipline, loyalty, and respect, not just in life, but in the work itself, and millions of viewers could feel that intensity every time he stepped on screen. He was the backbone of one of television's most influential shows, a presence so solid it felt untouchable. But behind the ratings, behind the laughter, there was one relationship that quietly cracked apart and never healed. For the rest of his life, Carroll O'Connor made one choice that spoke louder than any public accusation. He never spoke that name again. The chemistry that helped build a television legacy when All in the Family first aired was undeniable, yet almost no one could have predicted how deeply it would cut into the American conscience. The show didn't ease its way into living rooms, it kicked the door open. It challenged assumptions, sparked arguments, and forced viewers to face uncomfortable truths about class, race, and generational conflict. At the center stood Carroll O'Connor as Archie Bunker, loud, rigid, opinionated, and impossible to ignore. Archie wasn't designed to be lovable, yet he was human enough that audiences leaned in instead of turning away. Across from him was a younger energy, sharper, quicker, and more flexible in tone, playing Archie's son-in-law, Mike Stivic. Their dynamic was explosive. Every argument felt raw. Every pause felt intentional. They weren't just tossing jokes back and forth. They were staging a cultural showdown in real time. Viewers didn't tune in just to laugh. They tuned in to watch two worldviews crash at the dinner table. The chemistry worked because it felt real, not manufactured. But that chemistry didn't come from comfort. Carroll O'Connor approached acting with near-surgical focus. He broke scripts down line by line, questioned motivations, obsessed over timing and rhythm. To him, Archie Bunker wasn't a cartoon. He was a carefully built human being, full of contradictions that had to stay intact for the show to matter. O'Connor believed if Archie became too broad, too preachy, or too simplified, the entire moral balance of the series would fall apart. His co-star came from a different mindset, younger, outspoken, and driven by ideas. He increasingly saw the show as a platform for bigger statements. Subtlety mattered less to him, while the message mattered more. Early on, those differences stayed under control. Arguments happened in rehearsals, but professionalism kept things from boiling over. Crew members later said nothing ever blew up outright. But as ratings soared and the show turned into a cultural powerhouse, that tension started to simmer hotter. Creative debates sharpened. O'Connor began to feel the heart of Archie Bunker, flawed but layered, was being nudged aside in favor of something louder and more ideological. Still, the work never slipped. On screen, the two men delivered performances that felt inseparable, like the tension itself became part of the show's DNA. What viewers didn't realize was that this balance depended on restraint, and restraint doesn't last forever. As creative tension turned personal and All in the Family pushed deeper into its run, cracks widened. The success that should have united the cast instead exposed fault lines. Carroll O'Connor was no longer just the star. He became the protector of the show's internal logic. He knew Archie only worked if audiences were allowed to wrestle with him, not instantly dismiss him. That balance demanded discipline, restraint, and consistency. Every shift in tone mattered. Behind the scenes, O'Connor pushed back on scripts he felt leaned too hard into moral lecturing. According to multiple crew members, he asked for rewrites when dialogue felt designed to score points instead of reveal character. These weren't outbursts, they were calm, deliberate objections rooted in craft. Writers listened, sometimes reluctantly, and more often than not, O'Connor's instincts proved right. His co-star, though, was moving the other way. As his confidence grew, so did his willingness to challenge not just lines, but the deeper philosophy of entire scenes. He believed the show had to clearly condemn Archie's worldview. Ambiguity, in his eyes, was dangerous. To him, the real risk wasn't oversimplification, it was subtlety being mistaken for approval. That divide might have stayed manageable if it stayed behind closed doors, but over time it started to spill out. During live tapings, improvised lines began shifting the balance of key scenes. Jokes landed harder, sharper, sometimes cutting Archie down instead of exposing him. For an actor like O'Connor, who built performances beat by beat, this was destabilizing. It wasn't about ego, it was about control of meaning. One moment, often recalled by crew members, involved a scene where O'Connor felt a clear line had been crossed. He raised concerns. He asked for adjustments. His co-star refused. The episode aired mostly unchanged, and to the audience, nothing seemed off. But to O'Connor, it confirmed a pattern. His interpretation of Archie was slowly being overridden, piece by piece. The tension never exploded in public. There were no screaming matches, no slammed doors. Instead, something colder took hold. O'Connor grew more guarded on set. Conversations shortened. Trust narrowed. Other cast members noticed the shift and tried to smooth things over, but the divide had moved beyond performance style. This was about ownership, of the character, of the message, of the legacy taking shape in front of millions. What made it sting even more was that O'Connor still believed in the partnership. He never coasted. Scene after scene, he delivered the same precision, the same emotional weight. The work stayed flawless, but off-camera, the relationship thinned, stretched tight by the feeling that they were no longer telling the same story. Then came the moment that changed everything, not on set, but in public. Words spoken outside the show cut deeper than any argument ever could. For years, the tension stayed contained within studio walls. It was uncomfortable, but controlled. Then, without warning, it spilled into the open, and once it did, there was no pulling it back. During an interview about the cultural impact of All in the Family, O'Connor's co-star was asked a familiar question: what did Archie Bunker represent? At first, the response sounded measured, even thoughtful. Then the tone shifted. He distanced himself, not just from the character, but from the idea that Archie deserved any sympathy at all. Archie was labeled dangerous, a symbol of thinking that should be rejected outright, not examined. The message was unmistakable. Archie wasn't a mirror, he was a warning. To O'Connor, it didn't sound like analysis, it sounded like a dismissal. It felt like betrayal. O'Connor had spent years shaping Archie as a human contradiction. Yes, Archie was ignorant, but he was also wounded, shaped by poverty, fear, and inheritance. He wasn't meant to be admired, but he wasn't meant to be written off as a cartoon villain either. O'Connor believed flattening Archie into something purely toxic destroyed the moral complexity that made the show matter in the first place. What hurt most wasn't disagreement, it was timing and exposure. The comments were quoted everywhere, replayed in newspapers and television segments, stripped of nuance. Suddenly, O'Connor found himself defending not just a character, but his own integrity. Whispers followed him. Some viewers began blurring the line between Archie's views and the man portraying him.
O'Connor denied it again and again, but the damage lingered. Friends later said he felt abandoned. The man who built his career in opposition to Archie's worldview now seemed to be stepping away from the foundation that made that opposition meaningful. Worse still, O'Connor felt those comments erased the shared responsibility behind the work. Archie Bunker hadn't been created in isolation. He was the product of collaboration, trust, and mutual risk. Now, in O'Connor's eyes, that collaboration was being quietly disowned. He never fired back publicly, no rebuttal interviews, no sharp remarks. Instead, he withdrew. In later conversations, he stopped saying his co-star's name altogether. When asked about the cast, he praised the writers, the producers, Gene Stapleton, everyone except the man who had stood across from him for years. This wasn't a cooling off phase, it was a choice. Privately, O'Connor told friends he felt left alone to defend the character they had built together. He had carried the burden of misunderstanding for years, trusting the work would speak for itself. Hearing that same work publicly reframed as harmful felt like a personal line had been crossed. From that moment on, the silence was deliberate, and silence for Carroll O'Connor was never accidental. The partnership survived creative tension. It did not survive public disavowal. What makes the silence even more tragic is that proof of their connection already existed, captured long before everything hardened. There was one moment that showed just how deeply O'Connor and his co-star could still connect when trust was allowed to exist. It came quietly, without hype, buried inside an episode that seemed ordinary at first glance. But for those who understand the history of All in the Family, it later became almost painful to watch. The episode was Two's a Crowd, airing late in the series. The setup was simple. Archie and Mike accidentally locked themselves inside Archie's storeroom overnight. No crowd spectacle, no shouting match. Just two men, a bottle of liquor, and time. What followed wasn't written the way it appeared on screen. As the night stretched on, the conversation turned inward. Archie, usually guarded and combative, began talking about where his beliefs came from. He didn't defend those beliefs, he explained them. He talked about his father, about how hatred is learned the same way someone learns to throw a ball or tie a shoe, not through cruelty, but through trust. He described growing up during the Great Depression so poor that he went to school wearing one shoe and one boot, earning the nickname Shoe Booty. He remembered being locked in a closet as punishment, not with rage, but with quiet resignation. Years later, Carroll O'Connor revealed that much of that dialogue was improvised, and so was his co-star's response. There were no notes, no rehearsed tricks, no safety net. What made the scene work was trust, the rare kind that exists only when two actors listen instead of perform. In that moment, Mike stopped arguing, he stopped correcting, he simply listened. For the first time in the series, Archie wasn't a target or a symbol. He was a man shaped by inheritance, fear, and pain. The impact lasted. From that episode on, Mike's tone toward Archie changed, not into approval, but into understanding, real understanding. For viewers, it became one of the most emotionally devastating scenes the show ever aired. For O'Connor, it was proof that Archie Bunker's humanity had always been the point, that prejudice isn't born in isolation, it's passed down quietly, like poison through generations. And that's what makes everything that followed so tragic, because that scene showed what the partnership could be when ego disappeared. It showed respect, it showed empathy, it showed two men capable of holding complexity without destroying it. In hindsight, it feels like a reconciliation that only existed on screen. Off camera, the distance only widened. The irony was brutal. The deepest moment of connection between Archie and Mike arrived just as the real relationship between the actors was breaking beyond repair. What should have been remembered as a shared triumph became for O'Connor a reminder of something already slipping away. When later interviews reduced Archie to something dangerous, something to be rejected outright, that scene stood in silent contradiction. It proved the character was never simple. It proved understanding once existed, even if it couldn't survive outside the script. The audience remembered growth. Carroll O'Connor remembered truth. And truth, once abandoned, is not easily forgiven. When All in the Family finally ended, it closed one of the most important chapters in television history. For audiences, it marked the end of a ritual. For the cast, it marked a separation that quietly shaped the rest of their lives. Carroll O'Connor didn't walk away from Archie Bunker. He carried him forward when the story transitioned into Archie Bunker's place. He stayed committed, not out of nostalgia, but conviction. He believed uncomfortable characters still mattered, that television shouldn't smooth out human flaws just to feel safe. Even when he found new success in the Heat of the Night, Archie's shadow followed him, sometimes as praise, sometimes as weight. His former co-star went another direction entirely. He stepped away from acting into directing, then producing, then shaping films that defined a generation. The rise was fast. Awards came, prestige followed, influence grew. And as that career expanded, the past narrowed. In interviews, achievements were celebrated. All in the Family was mentioned carefully, its cultural impact praised. But one name, again and again, was missing. O'Connor noticed, at award ceremonies, at retrospectives, when the show was honored. O'Connor always spoke generously. He praised Norman Lear, he praised Gene Stapleton, he praised the writers, the crew, the risk they all took together. But he never spoke his former co-star's name. Not once. Reporters noticed, colleagues noticed. This wasn't bitterness, it was restraint. Friends later said it wasn't about pride, it was about boundaries. O'Connor believed something essential had been broken, not by creative disagreement, but by erasure. He felt the work they built together had been reframed without him, that he'd been left to carry the moral weight of a character no longer wanted to stand beside. When asked years later if he missed working with the cast, he answered carefully, "Some of them." Pressed about the man who played his on-screen son-in-law, he paused. The boy did a good job. No name, no warmth, no explanation. That silence was deliberate. O'Connor was precise with language. Silence, for him, wasn't absence, it was meaning.
When he died in 2001, tributes poured in. Writers praised his discipline. Actors praised his generosity. Norman Lear called him irreplaceable. But one voice was missing. No public statement, no appearance, no farewell. So here's the question. Was Carroll O'Connor right to draw that line and never cross it again? Or should the past have been laid to rest? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if this story hit you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and support Silent Stardom for more untold chapters from television history.